Good to go. Okay, we'll just wait a few more minutes and then we'll kick off. For the people already in the room, I wrote down a couple of clues in terms of things to consider when you're tasting it all. So I'll put that in the chat. So of the 6, there's 2 wineries that actually have 2 labels, and to make it, that's why I wrote it down, to make it even more complicated, each of them has 100% Cabernet and a Bordeaux blend. Traditionally, South Africa, I sort of vacillate depending on what I'm drinking at the time, but generally speaking, I prefer their Bordeaux blends. I guess it's for the same reason that when I drink a bit of Australian red, I always find myself leaning in towards Shiraz Cabernet as opposed to the single varietal. Somehow the combination of the two seems to, for me personally anyway, seems to give me a better run for my money. But having said that, what's quite exciting about tonight is looking only at Stellenbosch. What would have been first prize is to look only at one vintage, but I'm really hanging this off the Conde, the Stock Conde award from Decanter for the best Cabernet and Cabernet blend out of South Africa for last year. So in no particular order, according to what the advertising for the night, it might be an idea for you guys just to get an idea of the phenolics first, because I've got to say that looking at them earlier tonight, they're all over the spectrum in terms of flavor and performance. And we've got a fair bit of 2018 here, and we've got a 2019, and I think that's going to stand out. The other one that's going to stand out is the one that's in Stellenbosch. The one Cabernet blend is in Stellenbosch, and it should, by the numbers, show itself as slightly more aggressive. It's certainly at this early stage. Characteristics of Cabernet from Stellenbosch, generally, if you're playing it by the numbers, is that it emulates a lot of right bank Bordeaux. It has that sort of lushness of Margaux or Pauillac. It's sort of ornate, lavish kind of flavor. Just geographically, for those who haven't drunk much from Stellenbosch, it's a few kilometers off the coast and enjoys a maritime style climate, very, very similar to Margaret River in terms of distance from the ocean, in terms of irrigation by the ocean fog, etc. But I've got to say that I'm yet to confuse Margaret River Cabernet with Stellenbosch Cabernet. It's definitely, for me, Stellenbosch seems to echo more of an old world style in relation to what Margaret River does, even at the very, very top end. Yeah, they're all very, very different. You should be able to pick up relatively easily the pure Cabernets. Having said that, I know which they are, and they're quite good.
Yeah, it's easy for you, you friggin' dwarf.
Yeah. It's great for me to concentrate.
Well, you bought them all. The rest of us human beings have to figure it out, right?
Well, the way to strip it back is Petit Verdot is always going to give you a sort of green Madagascar peppercorn kind of top note to it. And so that's definitely standing out for me, particularly with 2 of them, which will automatically enable you to differentiate the Bordeaux styles from the plain Cabernet. Maybe it might be an idea just to see if we can find the plain Cabernets first, and then narrow down the blends after that. In terms of the wineries that we're looking at tonight, we're looking at Rustenberg plain Cabernet and Bordeaux blend, and we're looking at Meerlust plain Cabernet and Bordeaux blend. Then we're hanging those against Delaire Bordeaux blend and the Conde Stock Conde Cabernet blend. some interesting background to the Stark Conde story. There's a writer called Tim Aiken who you guys would see some ratings references in much of our South African wine. I would argue that maybe him, Neil Martin, and John Platter are the three most influential critics for South African wines. Tim Aiken a few years ago put together what he calls the first growth wines of South Africa. And amongst those are Botmanskop, Malanu, Eben Sadie, and Crystallum, as well as the Stark Conde. You may have come across Botmanskop for its most famous label, the chocolate block. It's known all over the world. It's certainly a secondary or tertiary level wine in terms of what they make. They're 7 flags or 5 flags is their premium range, but chocolate block has kind of developed a life of its own, being a blend of mainly Swartland fruit, Grenache, Shiraz, Mourvèdre mainly. But the Stark Conde that is somewhere in the mix tonight made history by being awarded the top South African wine from Decanter magazine in England, and 96 points at an extraordinarily low price. When I think of what other 96 pointers come out of Decanter at $45, it really is something of a steal. It also comes from 2017, which so far, if you're comparing 16 through to 19 as the sort of body of work from Stellenbosch Cabernets, I'm kind of picking 17 as the better vintage. So it has that small advantage as well. Yeah, the plain Cabernets, the way you're going to pick them tonight is they're not showing those top notes, that herbaceous, peppery top note. Very clearly in both examples are showing now as it's opening in the glass. You can actually probably start to eliminate the other 3 from that lineup.
All right, Rob, how do you want to do this? You want to start with?
Ask people to see if they can pick the Stelvin enclosure first, because that's showing for me showing the freshest on the nose. Then we'll start drinking.
The Stelvin enclosure first.
Any ideas? Anyone want to take a stab at it? 3, Yulin? Yeah, you're right. That's one of the Cabernets.
Question, Robert.
Number 3 is one of the plain sorry, no, wrong. It's a Bordeaux blend. Number. That's not. Sorry, Yulin, got it wrong. I'm going blind.
Number 1 sounds like a cab. Tastes like a cab.
More of a cab. Let me take you out of your miseries. Number 2 and number 4, the plain Cabernets. 100% Cabernet.
Question, Robert.
Yeah.
What's a Stelvin enclosure?
It's that one where you snap it, you twist the opening. It doesn't have a cork.
Oh, it's a twist top.
Yeah, twist top.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
It comes with all kinds of names around the world, including a few choice swear words.
Yeah.
One that seems to be gaining in popularity in contrast to the Stelvin is these glass tops, which the Greeks have been using for many years in their wines. And I've cracked more than a few bottles thinking that I'm sticking a corkscrew in, and it's actually a bloody glass enclosure. So any thoughts on the others in terms of the blends? Pretty much the Bordeaux blends are pretty much the same in terms of the content. So between 50 and 60% Cabernet, and all the rest of them are Merlot, Petit Verdot, or Malbec, and Malbec, I should say. They're very scrupulous in South Africa with the use of Petit Verdot because it's really, really powerful. In fact, there's only about 2 pure varietal Petit Verdots that I've ever tasted from South Africa that have kind of been impressive. And certainly my experience with Petit Verdot from the rest of the New World as 100% wines, I've never loved them. They've always been something that's better as Bordeaux. whoever made the comments about number one being, yeah, it's showing it's also 65% Cabernet. It's the highest content of Cabernet, short other than the Stark Conde. I really like the herbal notes in number one. It's only 50% new wood, and you're not really picking up much aggression. I would probably venture to say that it's all French oak. It's still quite aggressive being an 18, but I really like the combination of the 5 varietals in there. I'm getting quite a lot of action on the sides of my mid palate that is overly aggressive at this stage, but I think the DNA of that wine is very good. Maybe going to number 3, which is again the next Bordeaux blend. It's a 2016. Quite a lot of licorice. The fire in this wine has settled down quite a lot. We've had it on the database for maybe a year and a half or 2 years. It's one of the highest rated wineries out of Stellenbosch, and has been running for about 5 generations now. There's some of the guys in the tasting room who will have tasted this at a previous lineup late last year, November, December.
It's settled down a lot since then.
Yep, it's almost a completely different wine.
Mm.
The thing about this wine, when it was originally, well, certainly the last few vintages, was they've upped the game on cork, and it was often you're playing a bit of roulette with the acerbic structure of the wine, but not anymore. Opening 5 bottles today, every single one of them was constant. There's a wonderful, I was talking about Pauillac earlier, the wonderful richness and majesty about that wine, but it's also very settled, very much in place. So going to number 5, another Bordeaux blend. Much quieter wine on the nose than the others. Still relatively closed. What I did tonight, because South African Cabernets are really meant to be drunk at 10 years after vintage, I double decanted everything to try and give you a more accurate reflection of how they should be drunk. The thing I like about 5, if you contrast it to 3, the other Bordeaux blend, 5 has a far more detailed combination of flavors and balance on the nose. It's really, really finely etched tannins, and I find that super impressive. I think this is a wine that I might confuse with a higher end French Bordeaux from certain parts of France. I really like the detail and the texture. Just soft and easy and balanced. And then number 6. You can tell it's 2 weeks since I've done a tasting online. I'm all over the place now. Gosh, that's nice. Kind of harmonious. There's a little bit of a hole for me in the mid palate. And maybe some wet tobacco, that kind of import. It's getting back to, after tasting 5, which is very much its own packaged identity, characteristics, going back to 6 reminds me a lot more of the bigger, brasher Stellenbosch Cabernets. There's a lot more in line for me personally between 3 and 6, or 1, 3, and 6 versus 5.
Rob, I think both 3 and 6 have very strong cedar flavor.
Cedar, yeah.
But 5
really
is more
curious.
restrained on the taste.
5 is more restrained, yeah. I think that's what I'm finding quite appealing about it. It's just slightly quieter overall. It's not sort of as aggressive as the others.
And it doesn't lasting long compared to the other. It make me think maybe take more time in the glass can be better.
Yeah. I won't give too much away, but with this particular one, Lou's tasted quite intensively, more than I've tasted, and he suggested that opening it and waiting till the next day, it got even better, which is why it's quite difficult because it's a different vintage from many of the others. More than that, I'm going to give the game away, I think. Peter, I think it's just that easy softness about it that I really like. Most of the ratings on it will suggest that it's in its window from 2020 until about 27.
You're talking about number 5, Rob?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I would say they're pretty impressive.
Yeah. Especially at discount to world pricing.
They've come a long way. I mean, I remember South African Cabernets being sort of dusty and a bit Hunter Valley. You know what I mean? A bit of wet earth and stuff like that, and a lot of cork problems in the past. A lot of cork problems.
Very clearly, that's not an issue anymore. It seems very clear. I mean, the quality of these across the board, and we're looking at 3 different vintages here, right? And the quality across the board is so impressive compared to.
They're very clean. They're all very clean. You couldn't say that about South Africa 5 years ago.
No, definitely not. I remember the most famous label for me growing up there was KWV. Crops of vein for I don't know. My Afrikaans is no good anymore. Anyway, it was a co-op of mainly Stellenbosch brands, and it was the only one that managed to get exported during the sanctions era. And it was all about that dust, Lou. And you know, Niederberg, all the very big names, Constantia, etc. The old school styles were all that kind of archaic, grippy, chewy kind of thing. And there's very little evidence in any of these, despite the fact that they are all they're all recognized as old school styles. There's just nothing there it might be that, you know, the winemakers are definitely moving to a more easily consumable style. That's one thing. I would dare say that number 3 for me gives me the greatest confidence for long-term cellaring.
Yeah.
Number 3, I can see that I can see the shoulders of the wine. So I agree with what Peter was saying about 5 as to whether it's ready now and how long it's going to travel beyond that. It's a hard one, but it's certainly a uniquely tasting wine.
Number 5.
I just like the detailing in it. It's certainly the quietest of all the wines in terms of phenolics and alcohol and brashness.
Is anyone else getting a touch of eucalyptus on number 5? I'm just getting a touch of eucalyptus on or menthol.
Some sort of green minty sort of thing.
Yeah.
It's interesting because they often talk about Margaret River Cabernets echoing that coolness. There's the old debates about Margaret River for the Australians amongst us, where they always go on about Margaret River Cabernet showing eucalypt because of eucalyptus trees. There's the argument, you know, that the terroir is dictated by that. Certainly in the Stellenbosch example, if there's any tree that's going to dictate the flavor of the wine, it's going to be oak trees, because that's kind of the thing that it's so famous for. Very, very old oak trees.
There's no eucalyptus up there?
Not to my recollection. It's certainly, if they are, it's not that sort of stereotypical presence like it is in Margaret River.
Okay. So do South Africans prefer the blends or the straight cabs?
Probably the blends.
Yeah.
I would say, and certainly growing up, those are the ones we always kind of leaned into. The cab blends and Chenin Blanc are the two, probably the things we brushed our teeth with. I'm very impressed with number 6, despite its very humble price point. In fact, I think it's the cheapest wine in the lineup tonight. Yes, it is. No, it's not. Bar one. I really, really like what it's doing. It's got Stephanie Lima has eucalyptus. Oh, really? Oh, that's interesting. Thanks for letting us know. The Lima estate, I don't think I've ever walked around there. I don't think I've been to that one. Been away too long. In fact, I'd argue that 6 has given me more of that eucalypt action than 5.
Well, my palate's a bit suspect at the moment.
I really like the finish on 6. That's the one that's in Stelvin, and it's defying what I was expecting it to do in terms of its fruits and its presence. It's actually quite evolved. It's not showing more aggressively for the fact that it's Stelvin. 93 points from Tim Aiken and $36.
Well, I fully expected to not like one of these wines, at least one, because I've never been a big fan of South African Cabernet, but
yeah,
they're right. They're right.
Hey Lou, I completely concur with what you just said. And to be honest, I'm very surprised with the lineup of these 6 wines. In the past, I used to say South African wines, that's all. But you said eucalyptus and mint and all these kind of. And now, to be honest, I like them all. It's a very nice lineup.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they're very clean, aren't they, Peter? I mean, they're clean.
Yes, extremely clean and balanced. And it's as if, now I haven't had too many South African wines in the last 10 years, I must be honest. But this is quite a surprise.
Yeah.
So, Rob, just and I'm a novice to South Africa.
Grant, I hear you. I don't see you.
Oh, sorry. I'm on my video now, so I was late. So.
Okay, no worries.
But this is my very first introduction, to be quite frank, to South African wines, and I haven't heard comments. Although I just heard Lou say then, I'm really impressed with the consistency across all these 6 wines.
Correct. That's the perfect word. Yeah,
it's unbelievable, actually, to be honest. As Lou said, very crisp. I do like 5. Does appear to be a bit more complex. I even get nearly toffee caramel type flavors out of it. I don't know if anyone else does, but I have to say, super impressed with the consistency across all the 6 wines.
Mm-hmm. Well, what was interesting for me was the reason why I wanted to put this together was I managed to persuade Lou to let us take the Stork Conde because of its history. It's just so incredibly interesting. The winemaker is American, Jose Stark, and it's a wine that I'd never ever tasted before until tonight. I smelt it, of course, when we were doing the pouring this morning, but I'm super interested to see.
Can I ask a really, possibly a pretty basic question, but so this region of South Africa, what are they known for? I mean, is it
Cabernet?
It is Cabernet, okay.
Yeah, and Bordeaux blend, Cabernet blends.
Cabernet blends, okay.
Yeah. I mean, I think that if one ran the numbers on where Cabernet sits as a sort of demographic slice of South African wine industry, I would say that about a third of Cabernet is utilized as single, and 2/3 are put into blends.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm not sure how that contrasts against Australia, come to think of it. Probably more pure Cabernet in Australia.
Well, there's not a lot of pure Cabernet in those.
There isn't.
No, not much.
Okay.
Probably the only.
Yeah, that's probably the home of plain Cabernet.
Yeah.
Hey, Rob,
Yeah.
is a Cabernet blend a traditional thing in South Africa? I mean, it's usually all about Chenin Blanc and Cabernet Franc, right?
No,
Is
Rags,
it just a bunch of Bordeaux winemakers going in and suddenly changing styles?
No, not at all. In fact, it goes back to the 17th century when the South Africans were shipping most of their wine back to France, and most of France dictates a Bordeaux, certainly at that time, and even now, I would guess, dictates a style of Bordeaux blended wines, and that's, I guess, a cultural imprint that's remained within South African wine ever since. It's only, sorry?
3 and 5 and be much.
Sorry, I missed whatever you were saying.
Me.
We lost you. Oh, there you are. You keep jumping in and out of your back room, your background cellar.
That's right. Well, you know, he's on the stove as well.
So, Peter, when you get back to Belgium, what's the first red wine you're going to drink?
I'm going to take a, I probably will take a 2006 Barolo from my cellar.
That's a good start. It's a humble start, but it's a good start.
Humble?
No, but after being separated from your cellar for all this time, you must be licking your chops, right? You must.
I am. But
Derek,
luckily, Robert, and it's really to you and Lou and others. I found a really interesting, you know, every Thursday or every other Thursday we were doing these kind of things, and it really helps. You know, it's a fantastic kind of replay for being at home in the cellar. It's a fantastic experience, really.
That's awesome. I'm so pleased. Derek's asking about vine age on these Cabernets. Derek, I would say they're at least 60 years old, and some of them as much as 300 years old. Stellenbosch is one of the oldest regions in South Africa. It's not to say that it's the same vines, it's the same rootstock, because like Burgundy, as things age, they get to a stage when they're not yielding anymore, and they get grafted back onto the rootstock. So it's a bit of a fallacy to look at the actual age of the vine and say, this vine is 300 years old, because the actual fertilizing part that the grape actually yields from is much, much younger. But typical alcohol content, Peter, lower than South Africa, lower than Australia by average. I would suggest that number 5 is the lowest alcohol content of everything we're tasting tonight. I'd say that's maybe 12.5% or 12%, and the rest 13.5%, probably. Yeah, time to vote.
So low.
Yeah. So,
did they have phylloxera? Rob, did they have phylloxera?
No. They wrongly say they're the only place in the world that didn't have it. There are other patches. Even in Burgundy, there's a few patches that escape phylloxera. So no, there's no phylloxera at all that we know of or has ever been reported.
So it's all original rootstock, yeah?
Yeah, because if for any of the guys who have been to Cape Town, if you do, the easiest wine route to do is the Constantia wine route, which starts at the top of the hill and you kind of weave your way down through about 8 or 9 wineries. It takes the better part of a day if you're being aggressive about it. And all of those vineyards were there since the late 17th century. And again, this grafting has happened. So it's no longer 300 and 400 year old vines. It's the roots that are still 300 and 400 years old. But notwithstanding that, certainly that rootstock, that gravitas and age lends a certain quality to the wines. So Rustenberg, for example, is probably in this lineup that we're looking at tonight, probably one of the oldest brands that we're seeing in the lineup. And they are probably about 350 years old for their oldest patches. So wow. How about we do a vote for the wine of the night, and then we'll see if we can pick the stock. So votes for number 1. You can put it in the private if you don't want to yell out. Grant, where you putting your numbers, and where's your missus? Because she always votes against you.
Yeah, I know, but she's in quarantine in Melbourne.
Oh, okay. So you can carry a proxy.
I'm a big fan for number 3.
3? All right.
Which means she'd be a big fan for something that's not 3.
No doubt. We need to find something that's the antithesis of that. Okay, I'm taking vote.
Yeah, I'm number 3.
Yeah, number 3.
3 again.
4.
Well, the dogs are voting for number 2.
Well, I do like 5 too, by the way.
5? Yeah.
No, 3's my vote.
3's your pick. Oh, well done, Peter. He's voted for everything. You should be a Six. Yeah, I've got to say Shahid, yeah. Okay, all the votes in. We'll just wash it through the Dominion machine. And it looks like number 3 is the winner by a fair way. What's that?
Must be wrong.
Must be wrong. Number 3 is the winner, and followed by number 6. So number 3 is Meerlust Rubicon, 2016. That's the 97 pointer, 97 plus pointer.
Okay.
And it's one of the cleanest, most expressive, just delicious examples of Rubicon that I've tasted in a while.
So which one's that one? Sorry?
Number 3. I'll send you guys the lineup later, just after the tasting. But number 3 is the Meerlust Rubicon.
Okay, yeah.
And number 6 is the Rustenberg John Merriman 18.
Really?
Yeah, it blows me away, Lou. Just takes it out of the game. It's so good. For its price point, it's half the, or not half. Yeah, it is. It's half the price of the Rubicon. I think it's delicious.
Mm.
Do we vote on our least favourite?
Yes, definitely. Let's see, private chat. Stephanie, you're the only person who voted for 4. 4 is Meerlust Cabernet. 2's your least favourite. I've got to say I'm with Stephanie and Grant on number 2. Yeah. That's the Rustenberg 100% Cabernet. It just doesn't show the zhuzh that the Merriman does, and in fact, that's a really interesting example as to why the South African Bordeaux blends are just more interesting. They've just got more layers and more levels to them, right? More perspective.
But doesn't Rustenberg make whatever the one that you salivate over? What is it?
The Nicholson. They make the Orem Nicholson, which we have, and they also make. Derek, you're right. The Chardonnay. I don't know if we have the Chardonnay at the moment. And then they make a really expensive Pinotage, but I reckon they just keep that for the American tourists because it's so expensive. I think it's like 1,000. I think it's 1,500 rand a bottle or something.
But who makes that Paul Sour thing or whatever you call it?
Oh, Conde. So that's also a Bordeaux blend. That's 60% Cabernet, also Stellenbosch.
Right. And the Peter Barlow?
That's Conde as well. That's plain Cabernet, I think. If it's not plain Cabernet. Yeah, Rags.
Rob, how about the Sadi brothers? Do they make Cabernet Sauv?
No, the Sadis are really Grenache and Syrah specialists, and that's mainly determined by the fact that they're in the Swartlands. Cabernet would just die in the Swartlands. It literally is a desert. So Grenache, Syrah, Mourvèdre are the 3 things that do really well in the reds, and Chenin Blanc in really, really meso climates where they're protected to get some kind of humidity out of it. Lou, I think the Conde, the Paul Soyer, I think currently is the most expensive Bordeaux, certainly the hardest to get out of South Africa. I would say that we've watched that price go from about 60 Sing when we first got to Singapore and there was an importer, we did a little bit of it. And now I'd say it's at least 2.5 times that price, if one could find it. Even London, which is the clearinghouse for premium South African reds, even London barely shows it. It's very, very expensive.
So is Stellenbosch still king for Cabernet, or are these new regions?
Yeah. Oh, undoubtedly. Yeah. The other regions like Elgin and Franschhoek is more aligned towards the Burgundian exposure, so it's more about Pinot and Chardonnay, whereas Stellenbosch is really about Cabernet and a little bit of Chardonnay. I really like the Constantia Chardonnays a lot. So there's quite a lot of breakouts in terms of.
What about climate? Are they threatened by climate change? Because I know they had a big drought there a few years ago, right?
I think Stellenbosch will outlive the Swartland in our lifetimes because it's a maritime climate. So what they're not getting from the rain, they're getting from the ocean fog. Whereas Swartland is just flat and hot and hellish. There's no boil water. I can't describe how awful it is. Well, it's Alice Springs actually, without the mountain. What
about what's this Franschhoek place? Where's that?
Okay, so Franschhoek is quite close to Stellenbosch, but it's literally on the ocean. So it's whereas Stellenbosch is a little bit further inland. Yeah, Hermanus, Peter, very much so. So from Hermanus comes Hamilton Russell, which many people will say is the best Pinot Noir in South Africa, and we sell that as well. And the Hamilton Chardonnay, which I really like a lot.
We've been there and we were so impressed with their Pinot Noir.
Really, Hermanus is beautiful. It's this. They've kept the whole fishing village atmosphere. Everybody has to have thatch. It has to have white walls only. So it's very observant.
We went to Hamilton Russell to taste Chardonnay, and then we tasted the Pinot Noir, and we say, "Oh my!"
Yeah, the Pinot is blinding. So number 5 is the Conde, the stock Conde, the 96 pointer. What's interesting is it's the only vintage tonight that's a 17. Everything else is either 16 or 18 or 19, and it might be that a function of 17. I'm dying to taste Rubicon 17. I'm sure we'll get it in the fullness of time. But certainly it's showing a calmer, more balanced characteristic in relation to the others.
Well, they reckon 17's the best vintage. Like 16 apparently was one of the better vintages ever, but from what I've read, 17 they think is better.
Yes. They're calling that. It's interesting because 17 in much of the rest of the wine world is very ordinary. So it's definitely not an excelling vintage. I think where else in the world, Lou, is 17 performing? I can't think of anywhere.
Well,
really.
In Europe it was hot, right? It was just really hot. It was a hot year, 17. And I remember we were on holiday in Croatia.
I remember you texting me, you were melting every day.
I think they had about 14 days straight of 40 plus. It was just extraordinary. So your early ripening stuff was great, but anything that needed finesse, I mean, it was really, you had to do the work in the vineyard, right, to get it off before it went. Margaret River was good. Margaret River always has good years. I mean,
but I'm not seeing heat influence in the 17. I'm not seeing that kind of pulpy.
But was it hot in South Africa? California was great, 17.
All I know is that 17 is recognized as a historically good year in Stellenbosch. So maybe that's the reason.
Which one was the drought year where everyone ran out of water? Which year was that?
Well, I was in South Africa then. So when was that 2019 was when no one had water and we're all fighting over taps and stuff.
19. Okay. But is that good or bad for Stellenbosch? I don't know.
19, well, we'll see. It certainly, I would suggest that Stellenbosch 19 will outclass much of the rest of South Africa because it's not as reliant on irrigation as much of the rest of South Africa. So if one was picking regions in SA, 19 would be all about Stellenbosch. Stephanie, you're right. The more I taste the stuff, the more I like it. I think it's just delicate. It has this kind of, that sort of almost Burgundian cashmere softness about it, which is really unusual. Yeah, exactly right. I'm delighted with
Yes,
it.
Robert. It has a very, very beautiful elegance to the Start Conde. Even the locals swear by it when I was there a long time ago.
Really?
Yeah. Really, it's almost impossible to get a visit if you don't make an appointment in advance.
Oh, okay. It's one of those sort of places.
Yes. Beautiful. It's the first time I'm having it.
Me too, and I'm overwhelmed. When I noticed the release notes, I kept sort of nagging Lou about it because the performance just is extraordinary for such an inexpensive wine. And then,
wow, I mean, to the South Africans, Start Conde is considered as a really, really premium. These are all the 4.5 stars. John Platter wines. Yeah.
I think it's Grant is number 5. I think it's that pedigree because what Tim Aitken has been saying for the last 12 years and listing the top. Well, I think it's 9 wineries that he lists in there. And incidentally, Hamilton Russell he lists as a pretender to like a secondary crew, if you will, of quality. Yeah.
Wow.
So I'm really into tasting because there's more than a couple on there that I haven't tasted before. Crystallum is one of the crew that I've tasted. And I love their Chardonnay. It's just blindingly good. And the Molyneux, which is, if I have my history right, is owned by the guy who used to make Meerlust back in the day. And then he went out, Chris Molyneux. I think he went out on his own.
Okay. I never enjoyed the Meerlust as much as the Rustenberg. I can't pronounce, but I think there are a couple other. Yeah, Rustenberg. I like that much more. It's much more old style.
Well, I think certainly for me, I
think a lot of wineries have evolved in South Africa a lot.
Yeah. That's the point Lou made earlier. Is they've cleaned up their act, right? They produce a product that's just ready now, as opposed to something where you really have to bury for 20 years.
Sure.
For me, the surprise of the night is 6. Because I've liked this wine, but it's always been a wine that's needed years and years and years to evolve. I'm super impressed with what they're showing from 9. That's a 19 as well, I think. Let me check. Oh no, it's 18.
If you drink something from Constantia, some of the blends, the Bordeaux blends plus Malbec or something, you probably get you probably enjoy as much as a old Bordeaux because the Constantia blends can actually keep very long. They're a Bordeaux blend.
Yeah. I've tasted sort of 50, 60-year-old Bordeaux blends from Constantia, and you're right. And they've stuck, even though they've had a change of management and ownership. In fact, I think Groot Constantia, Lou might know better than me, but I think it's now owned by a hedge fund in Europe.
Correct. Yes.
Constantia, right?
Yes.
Which is one of the reasons why the Van de Castans is now sold out of Paris instead of Stellenbosch, instead of Cape Town these days.
Yes. Hey, Rob, question for you. Something happened between the South African wines of 5 years ago and the South African wines that we're trying today. What is it? I mean...
Well, Lou, I remember...
Absolutely. I completely agree with what you just said, Lou. Absolutely.
Tourism. In a word, tourism, because the consumers, I think, are dictating a style. I remember 12 years ago going to San Francisco for a big international wine fair, and my heart sank when I went to the South African section because there were these 2 ladies behind a table with 2 very depressed South African flags hanging off the end of it. And for me, that just defined what South African wine was like in the international context. In the Argentinian stand, there were bullfights and barbecues and all this kind of stuff going on. And the Americans were just flying the flag. But I really think that South Africa has been late to the game, but they've caught up really quickly in terms of interpreting what style their consumers want.
But Lou, don't you think that the quality of wine has generally improved everywhere in the world, not just South Africa?
No doubt, right?
Production, much standards, etc., much better, much tighter.
No doubt. I think there's a whole bunch of young graduates that come on the scene, right, who are now flying around the world and spreading education and technique. So it's very difficult now to find a bad wine, no matter where you are in the world.
Yeah, exactly.
But mate, South Africa used to make a lot of bad wine. Honestly, this is a real revelation for me.
For me, if you talk about Pinotage, I think they still do.
Yeah, no one got rich rags trying to change the way people think. Like I've always said, Pinotage is like durian or okra. Either you love it or hate it. There's just no coming back from the dark side. It's this crazy grape. In fact, I don't know anyone who's fallen in love with Pinotage outside of South Africa. I think you've got to be there. You've got to be roasting an impala steak on a fire somewhere to really appreciate Pinotage, because
it's like clove cigarettes. They're fine in Indonesia as soon as you leave.
Yeah, but you get arrested anywhere else in the world if you're caught smoking them.
Right. No, but seriously, Rob, it must have been. It's a new wave winemaking, or
I think they've cleaned up their act, Lou. There's a lot of capex, a lot of foreign investment in this industry in South Africa. Because if you analyze the wines we're tasting tonight, Delaire is a fabulous number one. The Botmanskop is a fabulously capitalized family dynasty that made their money out of jewelry. So, in fact, for me, it's probably the second most beautiful place to stay in Stellenbosch. It's just amazing. So, no money has been held back in terms of the quality of the production. I would argue that Rustenberg is maybe an older school brand, but has a massive local following. I would say that probably during the coronavirus period, Rustenberg might be one of the wineries that suffered the most, because it's a locally followed brand. It's not necessarily an internationally recognized brand as much as Delaire might be. And then Rustenberg is a global brand, number 3. It's known all over the world, 3 and 4. It's it's 400 years old. It has a following all over the world, particularly in Western Europe. Not so much in America, but definitely in Western Europe. And
I've lost track here. Run me through this. So number 1, what was number 1?
Delaire Botmanskop.
Okay, number 2?
Yeah. Number 2 is Rustenberg 100% Cabernet, estate Cabernet.
Right.
Number
3 is the
Meerlust Rubicon.
Yeah.
Number 4 is Meerlust Cabernet.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Number 5 is Stark.
Right.
And number 6 is the Merriman, which is a Cabernet Bordeaux blend in Stellenbosch. Yeah.
Well, very consistent across the board, I must say.
Yeah. Yes, definitely. Ernie Elsa's. I remember we sold Ernie's wines, who's now a teetotaler. I think he's found religion or something, and he's stopped drinking. But his winery carries on, and Ernie's wines are really expensive now. They're some of the most expensive in the country. So I would argue that Rustenberg, particularly looking at this tonight, I mean, if you look at the average $35 bottle of red wine in Singapore, the quality of that Merriman is off the charts. If you're looking to spend a value buy, it'd be hard to find something that beats that.
Hey Rob, just sharing, if you would ask us what we remember from our trip to South Africa, it's Ernie Els.
Ernie Els, yeah.
Didn't know anything about golfing, so we didn't even know he was a golfer. We appreciated him for his winemaking, and especially for the view you had over there. It's like a fantastic place to visit.
Yeah, it's amazing.
And something we didn't touch on tonight is the Sauvignon Blanc from, because you know I'm a Sauvignon Blanc drinker.
Yes.
Vergelegen.
Vergelegen, yeah.
Yeah. And
having a really old school producer.
Lady Phillips restaurant, having lunch. It's a fantastic domain to visit as well.
Yeah. No, it's fun.
They serve Ernie Els wine up at Desaru at the golf course there.
Do they?
They do that, yeah.
I think it's because he redesigned that golf course.
No, he owns it. He owns a bit of it.
Oh, that explains it. It'd be kind of rude not to pour it then.
Time to go back.
I tried to arrange a tasting because he before Corona, he used to come in and out a couple of times a year. And I tried to arrange a tasting with him, and I was told that, no, he just drinks Coca-Cola now, but like Mr. Trump. He doesn't drink wine anymore.
Rob, one more question for you, a little bit off topic.
Yeah.
Constantia has got a reputation for making a legendary sweet wine, right?
Oh, the Van Costanz. We have that one.
Yeah, so what's the story on that one? Do you stock it or?
Yes, no, we have it. It's interesting because the history behind that is it's the wine that Napoleon used to drink when he was in
Alba.
Alba. Yeah. So apparently he drank so much of the stuff that he nearly drove his captors broke. Part of the deal was he could eat and drink whatever he wanted, and it's the wine that he liked. And at the height of its fame, it was supplied to the Romanovs. It was seen in Western Europe as the epitome of South African white wine. And to this day, they have it in the original earthenware bottle. You'll see it on the website. And they've kept very close to the spirit of that wine. I would say that I've been lucky enough to do lots of verticals in my time, but there was nothing better than a 40-year vertical of Verdekerstans, because being a fortified wine, it just lasts forever. And so what you're really seeing when you're drinking that far back in those sort of vintage wines is a pure expression of vintage, because the wine is so old and it's all in such good condition. All you're seeing is wet and dry, cooler, longer ripening period, etc. From a technical point of view, it was one of the best experiences I ever had. Got a little
you have it in
messy
stock?
towards the end. Yes, it's in stock. It's online.
Can you send me an email with the link, please?
Yeah,
I don't think so, Rags. I think it's sold out.
Is it gone? Okay.
I'm pretty sure it's gone. I'll try and find some more. But the interesting thing about it is it's a non-fortified sweet wine, which makes it quite extraordinary. So it gets up to 16% alcohol, but that's all on natural sugar, on natural fermentation. Very intense. Mate, Rags, you and I have known each other for many years. Are you sure you want to be a diabetic?
Well,
I'm still getting used to your Trump T-shirt to start with.
It's not a Trump T-shirt.
But anybody who wears red in 2021 is well in trouble for being.
I'm living on the edge. You're going to have to kill 1.3 billion Chinese next week, by the way, for wearing red. So good luck.
It's a Native American.
I'm not that either.
Misappropriating it.
I would love to do a top flight Chenin Blanc tasting. We've got some really good David and Nadia single vineyard stuff. What I've got to do is find other stuff that we don't have to put against it, because
we've got some De Morganson.
Oh, okay. Did we get? That's right. We got the top one, the reserve.
That's from Marshall.
Lou opened up a door there, and I'm going to dive straight into it. I'm a big fan of England. I love my Tokais and muskets, and I can't buy them anywhere up here.
Well, Grant, you'll be very happy to know that tomorrow we're bringing in some stuff from McWilliams.
Oh, yeah. I mean, yeah. There's. I don't know if people love their fortifieds, but geez, I mean, you spend a weekend in the Rutherglen, and I mean, some of the amazing Tokais and muskets and the.
It's just so bloody hot here. Seriously, I can't think of an occasion to have a fortified.
Yeah, it's when the air conditioning's on and it's 12 o'clock at night. I'm eating chocolate. That's what it is.
There's some we got some Pedro Ximenez from Turkey Flat, but we got McWilliams musket and tawny coming in tomorrow, actually.
Beautiful.
Are we getting more of the Alvear from Rioja?
Yeah, we got some Alvear coming in from Spain. That's the 1927 Solera. That stuff's amazing.
Some Sevenfield and some some Browns and some
They don't export, Grant. They don't export. That's the trouble.
I'll smuggle it in my luggage and bring it up next time I go home.
Done deal. Done.
And forget about vintage port. You just can't get it out of Australia anymore. The tax regime has killed it off. So unfortunately, for vintage port, you have to either go into Langton's and buy it there,